A NASCAR Cup car is a heavy machinery that's hard to drive with a lot of horsepower underneath the hood. That's the way a Cup car has been throughout most of NASCAR history. But in the mid-2010s, NASCAR started taking away horsepower from the Cup cars. In 2015, the Cup cars went from making somewhere between 850 to 900 horsepower to 750 horsepower. This remained in effect until 2019, where NASCAR just went full-on dummy mode and not only lowered the horsepower to 550, but also added a ton of downforce to the cars. After 3 freaking years of the fans and drivers complaining about that package, NASCAR gave in and took a lot of downforce away and upped the horsepower to 670. Even though it's a step in the right direction, it's still not enough horsepower. NASCAR is so hell-bent on one of the Cup cars to have somewhere between 500 to 600 horsepower, and the reason why is because they are desperate of wanting new manufacturers to join the sport. They claim that manufacturers won't join if a Cup car is making 800 horsepower or more, even though there's street cars out there that make that amount of horsepower. Some people may say that 670 horsepower is considered high horsepower, but really it's not. There's multiple reasons why high horsepower needs to return. And when I say high horsepower, I'm talking about 800 horsepower or more. Reason 1, speed attracts. Seeing cars go over 200 miles per hour is cool. When you go back and watch races where these cars were unrestricted, you can visibly see how fast they were going down the straightaways. Some people would claim that it looks the same, but that's definitely not the case. They look like they're going at a snail's pace when they're going down the straightaways nowadays, and yes, I get that camera views does play a factor when it comes to the sense of speed, but they just don't look really fast because of the lower horsepower for the most part. Reason 2, high horsepower makes the cars even more edgier. The big story of this Gen 7 car so far is how hard it is to drive. It barely has any side force, which means it's harder to save when the driver gets sideways. Even though that's a huge positive, more horsepower will make the cars even more hard to drive. When you got a ton of power underneath the hood and trying to apply the throttle down, it makes it a challenge for the tires to hook up, especially when the tires are old. I remember Brad Keselowski making a post on his Twitter explaining how at Martinsville, when the cars were unrestricted, it was very difficult to get the power down coming off the corners. When you were on old tires, it was almost impossible to have the gas all the way down at Martinsville because you were just spinning the tires the whole time going down the straightaway. When the Cup cars had tons of horsepower, the cars had a ton of throttle response, which meant the drivers could make more of a difference. Reason 3, hearing the engine scream going down the straightaway. I mean, who doesn't want to hear this? I think that's enough said. Reason 4, it will help the short tracks and road courses. This kind of goes along with reason 2. So far, the Gen 7 car isn't putting on that good of racing at short tracks and road courses. There's plenty of things that you can look at like the tires or the diffuser, but I think the lack of horsepower at these tracks is part of the problem too. When NASCAR announced that they was going to run 670 horsepower everywhere outside of super speedways in Atlanta, I was expecting the short tracks to suffer, and well, I was right. I wish NASCAR can realize that one package doesn't work everywhere. We've seen fantastic racing at the intermediate tracks in 2022, but shorter tracks have suffered. And I will include road courses as well. You got drivers talking about dirty air and it's impossible to pass at tracks like Sonoma and Circuit de America, for example. And when you got drivers talking about that, you know you got a problem. Like I said, it could be other things with the car, but I think lack of horsepower doesn't help the on-track product. There's my reasons why NASCAR Cup cars need high horsepower. NASCAR needs to give up on this 500 to 600 horsepower crap that they've been pushing for years now. Motorsports like IndyCar, F1, and IMSA are getting faster while NASCAR is getting slower. NASCAR is supposed to introduce a new engine in 2024 that's going to have hybrid electrification built into it. Now, this doesn't mean that the cars are going to be quiet. Most likely the loud rumble will still be there. When it comes to power underneath the hood, there can most likely be an increase in horsepower depending on how NASCAR implements the hybrid electrification. I'm not an expert on this, so I'm not sure how NASCAR is going to do that. If you do know more about this, explain it in the comments. Speaking of the comments, I want to know what you guys think about this topic. Do you guys want the Cup cars to have more horsepower? Are you fine with 670 horsepower? And what's your opinion on NASCAR going hybrid in the future? That's going to be it for me. Y'all have a good one. Peace.